Hello there! Welcome to Darla's Book Club. I'm Darla. This is a club for everyone and anyone ready to discuss books, and more books! I love books, and I'm sure you do too. Traveling to unknown lands, delving into our history, admiring poetry and language? Oh, but I'm getting carried away. Sometimes the stories around how books are created are even more fascinating than the fictional tales themselves. And sometimes we're curious to learn about a book, whether we've read it or not. So with that, let's get to today's Darla's Book Club discussion. Today, we are going to talk about Charles Dickens' classic, A Christmas Carol. Welcome back to another edition of Darla's Book Club. When most people think of Christmas, visions of wonderfully decorated trees, twinkling lights, Santa Claus, and getting presents are the first things that come to mind. Did you know that the Christmas holiday is also home to one of the greatest ghost stories the world has ever known? One that moves effortlessly between being scary and being heartwarming? Of course, I am talking about the Charles Dickens classic, A Christmas Carol. Let's dive right in. Before we get to the story, let's take a quick look at its author. Charles John Huffman Dickens was born way back on February 9th of the year 1812 and lived until June 9th of the year 1870. Dickens was an English social critic and writer. He penned some of the world's most well-known fictional characters and is believed by many to be the most celebrated novelist of the Victorian era. During his lifetime, his stories enjoyed unprecedented popularity, and by the 20th century, scholars and critics alike recognized him as a literary genius. I love books. I could read all day. But learning the facts surrounding them is even more fascinating. Let's continue. Dickens' short stories and novels are as popular today as they were when they were first published. Wow! Talk about staying power! Charles Dickens was born in Portsmouth, which is a city located in Hampshire, England, that's about 70 miles southwest of London. Dickens served as an editor on a weekly journal for 20 years. He went on to write 15 novels, 5 novellas, and literally hundreds of non-fiction articles and short stories. One of his best known is A Christmas Carol. The book was originally published in London by Chapman and Hall in the year 1843. It featured some cool illustrations from an artist by the name of John Leech. A Christmas Carol tells the tale of an elderly miser named Ebenezer Scrooge. Over the course of a single night, Scrooge is visited by the spirit of his old business partner, Jacob Marley, and the spirits of Christmas past, Christmas present, and Christmas yet to come. The book was officially released just in time for Christmas on December 19th of the year 1843, and the first edition sold out by the following Christmas Eve. By the time that the end of the year 1844 rolled around, 13 editions of A Christmas Carol had been released. Many critics reviewed the book favorably. A Christmas Carol was illegally copied in January of 1844, and Dickens ended up taking legal action against the fraudulent publishers, who then went bankrupt. These actions led to the continued reduction of Dickens' already meager profits from the publication of his novella. In the following years, he went on to write 4 other Christmas stories. In the year 1849, Dickens started doing public readings of A Christmas Carol, and they proved so successful that he took on 127 more performances until the year of his death, 1870. To this very day, A Christmas Carol has never been out of print. It has also been translated into many different languages and has been adapted numerous times for the stage, opera, film, and other kinds of media. Wow! I didn't know all that, did you? It's incredible to learn where ideas come from and how they end up where they do. Let's keep this book club moving along. A Christmas Carol perfectly captured the essence of the mid-Victorian revival of the Christmas holiday. Dickens also acknowledged the influence that his story had on the modern Western observance of Christmas, as well as serving to inspire several aspects of Christmas itself, such as seasonal food and drink, family gatherings, games, dancing, and a festive generosity of spirit. Pretty cool, huh? Can you imagine writing a book that changed the world and the way we look at it? It's an incredible feat for sure. Let's check out the story itself. A Christmas Carol begins on cold Christmas Eve in London, several years after the passing of Scrooge's business partner, Jacob Marley. Scrooge is an aging miser who hates Christmas and everything having to do with the holiday. So much so that he even turns down a dinner invitation from his nephew Fred, who is the son of his now dead sister Fan. A mean old coot, Scrooge also turns away a pair of men who are seeking donations for the poor, who are hoping for a warm place to stay and a meal to eat. Scrooge is mean. He inspires fear, especially in his underpaid and overworked clerk, Bob Cratchit. It's not hard to feel bad for Bob, who has the unenviable task of asking for Christmas Day off with pay so that he could celebrate Christmas with his family. Scrooge begrudgingly grants Cratchit's request, but tells him that he had better report to work all the earlier the next day. Man, what a meanie! Once he finally makes it home, Scrooge is visited by Marley's ghost, who has found himself wandering the earth wrapped in the money boxes and heavy chains that he forged in life thanks to his selfishness and greed. Marley informs Scrooge that he has only one chance to avoid having the same fate. Scrooge is to be visited by 3 ghosts, and if he doesn't listen to them, he will be cursed to an afterlife of carrying far more massive and heavy chains of his own. The ghost of Christmas Past is the first spirit to visit Scrooge. The ghost takes the miser's hand and shows him the Christmas scenes of Scrooge's childhood. The spirit reminds Scrooge of a time when he was innocent and hoping to be loved. Scrooge is witness to his lonely childhood at his boarding school and his relationship with his beloved sister Fan. After some tears, the spirit then brings Scrooge to a Christmas party hosted by Mr. Fezziwig, Scrooge's first employer, who treated him, Ebenezer, like a son. It's soon after that Scrooge is reminded of his neglected fiancée Belle, who ends their relationship because she knows that Scrooge will never love her as much as he loves his money. On their final stop of the evening, Scrooge and the spirit visit a now married Belle who has a large and happy family. After hearing Belle's description of the man that he has become, Scrooge demands that the spirit take him back to his own house. Did you know all of that? Didn't think so. And we're just getting started! The second spirit to visit Scrooge is the ghost of Christmas Present. A hearty, jolly spirit, he takes Scrooge to a merry market that is brimming with people who are buying their Christmas dinner and more. From there, they head to a couple more current Christmas celebrations. The spirit then brings Scrooge to his nephew Fred's Christmas party, the very one that he had earlier declined an invitation to attend. One of the last stops on their spectral journey finds the spirit and Scrooge visiting with Bob Cratchit and his family. It is there that Scrooge becomes aware that Bob's youngest son, Tiny Tim, is gravely ill. The spirit tells Scrooge that Tiny Tim will die unless things somehow change. Before leaving Scrooge, the spirit shows him 2 hideous, emaciated children named Ignorance and Want, before issuing him a final warning and then disappearing into the night. The third spirit is the one who Scrooge is most afraid of, the ghost of Christmas yet to come. This dark-hooded figure reveals a Christmas Day in the future to Scrooge. The silent ghost shows him scenes involving the death of a hated man whose funeral was only attended by local businessmen on the condition that they were served lunch. The deceased man's cleaning woman, his laundress, and the local undertaker steal the dead man's possessions so that they can sell them at a later time. When Scrooge asks the spirit to show him just a single person who feels some kind of emotion regarding the man's death, he is shown a poor couple who are rejoicing over the fact that the man's death will give them more time to get their finances in order. Beside himself, Scrooge asks the spirit to see tenderness connected with any death. At that point, the spirit shows Scrooge, Bob Cratchit, and his family, who are mourning the death of poor Tiny Tim. The final thing that the spirit shows Scrooge is a badly neglected grave with a tombstone that has Scrooge's name etched into it. Crying profusely, Scrooge promises to change his ways. Scrooge then finds himself awake on his bed, not knowing what day it is. Had he missed Christmas? No. The spirits had showed him everything that they needed to in one evening. This Christmas morning, Scrooge is a changed man. He goes on to make a huge donation to the charity that he rejected on Christmas Eve, and then he anonymously sends a gigantic turkey to the Cratchit home for Christmas dinner. Now on his road to redemption, Scrooge spends the afternoon with his nephew Fred's family. When Cratchit returns to work the next day, he's greeted by a new Scrooge, one whom he considers to be thoroughly crazy. Bob is given an increase in pay, and Scrooge becomes a father figure to Tiny Tim, who, through Scrooge's generosity, can finally get the medical treatment he needs. From then on, Scrooge treats everyone with kindness and compassion, and is the very embodiment of the Christmas spirit. The wonderful world of books never disappoints. Let's keep talking. Where did writer Charles Dickens get the inspiration for his timeless holiday classic? For that answer, we have to take a closer look at his life. Dickens was born into a middle-class family. As he was growing up, his family, like so many others, began suffering through financial difficulties. It was his father's irresponsible and extravagant spending which led to his family's money woes. As a result, his father, John Dickens, was committed to the Marshalsea, a debtor's prison located in Southwark, London, in the year 1824. By age 12, Dickens was forced to pawn his book collection, leave school, and take a job at a filthy, rat-infested shoe blackening factory. According to Dickens' biographer, Michael Slater, this drastic change in circumstances instilled in Dickens a deep personal and social outrage. This answer is what heavily influenced his outlook on life and his writing. By the end of the year 1842, Dickens had become a well-established author. He had written 6 major works, many novellas and short stories, and numerous other pieces. It was on December 31st of that year that he started publishing his novel, Martin Chuzzlewit, as a monthly serial. Even though Chuzzlewit was Dickens' favorite novel, sales of it were anything but good, and as a result, faced temporary financial problems. During the Victorian era, the celebration of the Christmas season was growing in popularity by leaps and bounds. In the 18th century, Britain saw the introduction of Christmas trees whose usage was substantially popularized by Prince Albert and Queen Victoria. It wasn't long before Christmas trees could be found in many homes across the country. The early 19th century saw a renewed interest in the singing of Christmas carols. Dickens expressed an interest in Christmas, and his first Yuletide-themed story was called Christmas Festivities. It published in Bell's Weekly Messenger in the year 1835. Shortly after that, the story was then published once again under a new title, A Christmas Dinner, in 1836's Sketches by Boz. Wow, bet you're glad you joined Darla's book club now, aren't you? Let's keep this discussion going. Another Dickens Christmas story was called The Story of the Goblins Who Stole a Sexton. It appeared in the 1836 novel, The Pickwick Papers. In the tale, a man named Mr. Wardle relates the story of Gabriel Grubb, a mean-spirited and lonely sexton who undergoes a Christmas change of heart after he's been visited by goblins who reveal to him the past and future. Sound a bit familiar? Yup, it certainly does. The story was then followed by a passage about Christmas in Charles Dickens' editorial Master Humphrey's Clock. Professor of English Literature Paul Davis once wrote that even though the Goblin story looks to be a prototype of A Christmas Carol, it was all of Dickens' earlier writings about Christmas that influenced the celebrated tale of Scrooge. Dickens did have some literary influences. Obviously, he wasn't the only author to celebrate the Christmas season in literature. Some of the earlier authors who influenced him included Washington Irving. It was Irving's whose 1819 to 1820 work, The Sketchbook of Geoffrey Crayon, Gent, that was home to 4 essays on Old English Christmas traditions that he had encountered during his stay at Aston Hall near Birmingham in England. The tales and essays charmed Dickens. The two authors shared the belief that the staging of a nostalgic English Christmas could help bring back some of the social harmonies that had been lost in the modern world. Charles Dickens was a truly warm soul, far warmer than the meager fire Scrooge had let Bob Cratchit light in their office on Christmas Eve. Dickens was touched by the plight of poor children during the middle decades of the 19th century. Early in the year 1843, he embarked on a tour of the Cornish tin mines. While there, he found himself infuriated by the sight of children who were working in dangerous and horrifying conditions. Dickens also found inspiration for A Christmas Carol after visiting the Field Lane Ragged School, which served as one of many establishments that were set up for the supposed education of London's half-starved and illiterate street children. The horrid suffering that he had witnessed there impacted him greatly. The treatment of the poor, the selfishness of man, and the road to redemption are the critical themes in Dickens' story. Aren't book clubs the best? I love spending time talking about them, when I'm not reading, of course. Now our discussion continues. Here we go! In February of the year 1843, the second report of the Children's Employment Commission was published. It exposed the lasting effects that the Industrial Revolution had on working-class children. Dickens was sickened by what he read and immediately planned to publish a political pamphlet, which he tentatively called An Appeal to the People of England on Behalf of the Poor Man's Child. However, Dickens changed his mind and deferred the making of the pamphlet until the end of the year. In March of 1843, Dickens wrote to Dr. Southwood Smith, who was one of the 4 commissioners that were responsible for the second report regarding his change in plans. In the letter, Dickens wrote that, "You will certainly feel that a sledgehammer has come down with 20 times the force, 20,000 times the force I could exert by following out my first idea." While he was in attendance at a fundraiser at the Manchester Athenaeum on October 5th of 1843, Dickens gave a speech in which he urged employers and workers to band together as a means to fight ignorance with educational reform. In the days after that, Dickens felt that the most effective way to reach the largest portion of the population with his social concerns about injustice and poverty would be by writing a deeply felt Christmas story instead of essays and pamphlets. He was correct, and the public paid attention. By the middle of 1843, Dickens started to suffer his own financial problems. Sales of his novel, Martin Chuzzlewit, were on the decline, and his wife, Catherine, was pregnant with their fifth child. Things got even worse for Dickens when his publishers, Chapman and Hall, threatened to cut his monthly income down if his book sales didn't pick up. That's when Dickens began penning A Christmas Carol in October of 1843. Dickens' biographer, Michael Slater, wrote that A Christmas Carol was being written at white heat. That means that it was written quickly. Dickens finished his book in just 6 weeks, with the final pages of it being written during early December. Dickens came up with a lot of the framework for his story while taking his long nighttime walks around London. He was known at times to walk around 15 to 20 miles. Holy cow! Dickens' sister-in-law wrote that while he was writing, you could hear him as he wept and laughed and wept again and excited himself in a most extraordinary manner in composition. According to Slater, Dickens' intention with A Christmas Carol was to open its readers' hearts and make them aware of those who were struggling to survive on the lower rungs of an economic ladder. Dickens sought to encourage sensible acts of kindness while warning of the terrible dangers to society that the tolerance of ignorance would impose. That's a good point, don't you think? It's like they say, you can't judge a book by its cover. This story keeps getting better and better. The illustrator who had earlier worked with Dickens on 1836's Sketches by Boz and 1838's Oliver Twist, George Cruikshank, was the man who introduced him to the caricaturist John Leech. By October 24th, Dickens invited Leech to work on A Christmas Carol. This invitation led to the inclusion of 4 black and white wood engravings and 4 hand-colored etchings by Leech to appear alongside the book's text. Want to know some cool trivia? Dickens' handwritten manuscript of A Christmas Carol doesn't include the sentence in the story's penultimate paragraph, "and to Tiny Tim, who did not die." This line was added later during the printing process. I know what you're wondering. Were any of A Christmas Carol's characters based upon actual people? The answer may surprise you. Scrooge's name came from a tombstone that Dickens observed while on a trip to Edinburgh. He came upon a grave for a man named Ebenezer Scrooge. The tombstone read that Scrooge had a job as a mealman and that he'd been a corn merchant. Hilariously, Dickens misread the tombstone's inscription as Mean Man. Too funny, huh? One of the possible models for Scrooge was a man Dickens knew. His name was John Elvez, but he was known as John the Miser. In addition to the eccentric Elvez, Scrooge may also have been based in part on a man named Jemmy Wood, who was the owner of the Gloucester Old Bank. Many people knew Wood as the Gloucester Miser. Scrooge is described in the story as a squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching, covetous old sinner. It's also believed that Scrooge may have been influenced by Dickens' personal feelings towards his father. John Dickens was a man that Charles both loved and hated. Many scholars point to this psychological conflict as the reason for Scrooge's 2 different sides in the tale, one who is a stingy, greedy, and cold semi-recluse, and the other a kind and friendly man. Some believed that Scrooge may have been based in part on other characters in Dickens' works. Another Dickens biographer, Peter Ackroyd, has pointed out some similarities between Scrooge and the elder Martin Chuzzlewit character. According to Ackroyd, Chuzzlewit's transformation to a charitable figure is parallel to that of the miser. Professor Robert Douglas Fairhurst contends that the minor character Gabriel Grubb from the Pickwick Papers was also an influence when Dickens was creating Scrooge. But what of some of the book's other characters? am just a lover of words, aren't you? I think they call it a logo file, but this isn't all about me. Let's learn some more. While Dickens was a young lad, he lived near a tradesman's establishment. The sign on the door read, "Googe and Marnie." Some believe that this is where Dickens drew the inspiration for the name Marley. As for Marley himself, Dickens is said to have drawn on his memory of an 1842 trip to the Western Penitentiary in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. While there, he saw several chained prisoners, and the sight of them stayed with him for a very long time. Tiny Tim is thought to have been based, in part, on Dickens' nephew, Henry, who was disabled. Henry was 5 years old during the time A Christmas Carol was written. Want and Ignorance, the two children who were hiding in the robes of the Ghost of Christmas Present, were inspired by children Dickens witnessed during his visit to a ragged school in the East End of London. Charles Dickens wrote A Christmas Carol to shed light on British social attitudes towards poverty, with a particular emphasis on child poverty. He wanted to use the novella to underscore both his feelings and his anger about it. In the tale, Scrooge acts as a paradigm for self-interest and the possible consequences of ignoring the poor. Want and Ignorance allegorically personify child poverty. The duo was conjured as a means to garner the reader's sympathy, as was Tiny Tim. English professor Robert Douglas Fairhurst maintains that the usage of these figures allowed Dickens to put forth his message of the need for charity without alienating his primarily middle-class readership. Because of the commercial failures of Martin Chuzzlewit, Dickens and his publishers, Chapman and Hall, found themselves at odds. That's the reason why Dickens made arrangements to pay for the publishing of A Christmas Carol himself, in return for a profit percentage. The production of A Christmas Carol was met with a lot of problems. The book's initial printing was home to some ridiculously drab olive-colored end papers that Dickens thought were unacceptable. As a result, his publisher immediately replaced them with yellow end papers. However, the replacement pages ended up clashing with the title page, which then itself needed to be redone. The final product of A Christmas Carol was bound in red cloth and had gilt-edged pages. The scariest thing about it? It was completed just 2 days before the publication date of December 19th, 1843. Talk about just making it! After it was published, Dickens made arrangements for his original manuscript to be bound in red Morocco leather, which he presented as a gift to his solicitor, Thomas Mitton. That certainly does put things into context, doesn't it? Let's keep these words flowing and continue with the discussion. The Illustrated London News talked about how the story's impressive eloquence, its unfeigned lightness of heart, its playful and sparkling humor, its gentle spirit of humanity, all put the reader in good humor with ourselves, with each other, with the season, and with the author. A critic writing for the literary magazine The Athenaeum said that A Christmas Carol was a tale to make the reader laugh and cry, to open his hands and open his heart to charity even toward the uncharitable, a dainty dish to set before a king. Fraser's Magazine's William Makepeace Thackeray called the book as a national benefit to every man or woman who reads it, a personal kindness. The last 2 people I heard speak of it were women. Neither knew the other or the author, and both said, by way of criticism, "God bless him." Poet Thomas Hood wrote in his own journal that if Christmas, with its ancient and hospitable customs, its social and charitable observances, were ever in danger of decay, this is the book that would give them a new lease. Tate's Edinburgh magazine's Theodore Martin was always very critical of Dickens' work. Still, even he considered A Christmas Carol to be a noble book, finely felt and calculated to work much social good. Following Dickens' death, Scottish novelist and historical writer Margaret Oliphant admitted that in the days of its first publication, A Christmas Carol was widely regarded as a new gospel, and that it had the unique ability to actually make people behave better. Upon its releases, the religious press ignored the book for the most part, but then, in January of 1884, a high church periodical called the Christian Remembrancer praised the author's sense of humor and pathos. Social thinker and writer John Ruskin has been credited as saying that with A Christmas Carol, Dickens took the religion from Christmas and instead imagined it as mistletoe and pudding, neither resurrection from the dead, nor rising of new stars, nor the teaching of wise men nor shepherds. There were critics of the book. The New Monthly magazine praised the tale itself, but thought the book itself was his on physical excess, such as the expensive binding and gilt edges, kept the price high, entirely too high, thereby making it unavailable to the poor. According to their reviewer, that the story should be printed on cheaper paper so that it could be priced accordingly. An unnamed writer for the Westminster Review ridiculed Dickens' grasp of economics by inquiring, who went without turkey and punch in order that Bob Cratchit might get them? For unless there were turkeys and punch in surplus, someone must go without. After Dickens' criticism of the United States in his books, American Notes and Martin Chuzzlewit, U.S. readers were, at first, less than enthusiastic about the tale. However, by the conclusion of the American Civil War, copies of A Christmas Carol were in wide circulation. Nothing like curling up in bed with a good book, don't you think? Just warms my heart and jump-starts my mind. Let's keep discussing this. Back in the year 1863, the New York Times published an enthusiastic review noting that the author brought the old Christmas of bygone centuries and remote manor houses into the living rooms of the poor today. In January of the year 1844, Parley's Illuminated Library published an unauthorized version of the story in a condensed form which they sold for 2 pence. These actions prompted Dickens to write immediately to his solicitor. I have not the least doubt that if these vagabonds can be stopped, they must. Let us be the sledgehammer in this, or I shall be beset by hundreds of the same crew when I come out with a long story. 2 days after the release of the Parley version, Dickens sued on the basis of copyright infringement and won. The publishers declared themselves bankrupt, and Dickens was left to pay £700 in cost. The small profits Dickens earned from A Christmas Carol further strained his relationship with his publishers, and he broke with them in favor of Bradbury and Evans, who had been printing his works to that point. Dickens returned to the tale several times during his life to amend the phrasing and punctuation. He capitalized on the success of the book by publishing other Christmas stories: 1844's The Chimes, 1845's The Cricket on the Hearth, 1846's The Battle of Life, and 1848's The Haunted Man and the Ghost's Bargain. These were secular conversion tales which acknowledged the progressive societal changes of the previous year and highlighted those social problems which still needed to be addressed. While the public eagerly bought the latter books, the reviewers were highly critical of the stories. By the year 1849, Dickens was engaged with David Copperfield and had neither the time nor the inclination to produce another Christmas book. He decided the best way to reach his audience with his carol philosophy was by public readings. During Christmas of 1852, Dickens gave a reading in Birmingham Town Hall to the Industrial and Literary Institute. The performance was a great success. In the years following the book's publication, responses to the tale were published by W.M. Swepstone in 1850's Christmas Shadows, by Horatio Alger in 1863's Job Warner's Christmas, by Louisa May Alcott in 1882's A Christmas Dream and How It Came True, and others who followed Scrooge's life as a reformed man, or some who thought Dickens had got it wrong and needed to be corrected. The novella was adapted for the stage almost immediately. 3 productions opened on February 5, 1844, one by Edward Sterling being sanctioned by Dickens and running for more than 40 nights. By the close of February of 1844, 8 rival A Christmas Carol theatrical productions were playing in London. The story has been adapted for film and television more than any of Dickens' other works. In 1901, it was produced as Scrooge, or Marley's Ghost, a silent black and white British film. It was one of the first known adaptations of a Dickens work on film, but it is now largely lost. The story was adapted in 1923 for BBC Radio. The story has been adapted to other media, including opera, ballet, animation, stage musicals, and a BBC mime production starring Marcel Marceau. Some of the tale's adaptations have become better remembered than the original. Some of Dickens' scenes, like visiting the miners and lighthouse keepers, have been forgotten by many. At the same time, other events have been added, like the one which saw Scrooge visiting the Cratchits on Christmas Day, are now thought by many to be part of the original story. Isn't that incredible? There's so much to talk about, and we still got more to discuss. Can I stop for a moment and just say, I love books! Okay, I'm sorry, let's continue. The phrase Merry Christmas has been around for many years. The earliest known written use was in a letter in 1534, but Dickens' use of the phrase in A Christmas Carol popularized it among the Victorian public. The exclamation, "Bah, humbug!" entered popular use in the English language as a retort to anything sentimental or overly festive. The name Scrooge became used as a designation for a miser and was added to the Oxford English Dictionary as such in 1982. During the early 19th century, the celebration of Christmas was associated in Britain with the countryside and the reveling of peasants. It was disconnected from the increasing urbanization and industrialization that was taking place. Davis considers that in A Christmas Carol, Dickens showed that Christmas could still be celebrated in towns and cities despite increasing modernization. The modern observance of Christmas is largely the result of a mid-Victorian revival of the holiday. The Oxford movement of the 1830s and 1840s had produced a resurgence of the traditional rituals and religious observances associated with Christmastide, and, with A Christmas Carol, Dickens captured the zeitgeist while he reflected and reinforced his vision of Christmas. Dickens advocated a humanitarian focus of the holiday, which influenced several aspects of Christmas that are still celebrated in Western cultures, such as family gatherings, seasonal food and drink, dancing, games, and a festive generosity of spirit. The historian Ronald Hutton writes that Dickens linked worship and feasting within a context of social reconciliation. The novelist William Dean Howells, analyzing several of Dickens' Christmas stories, including A Christmas Carol, considered that by 1891, the pathos appears false and strained, the humor largely horseplay, the characters theatrical, the joviality pumped, the psychology commonplace, the sociology alone funny. The writer James Joyce considered that Dickens took a childish approach with A Christmas Carol to produce a gap between the naive optimism of the story and the realities of life at the time. Ruth Glancy, a professor of English literature, states that the largest impact of A Christmas Carol was the influence felt by individual readers. In early 1844, the Gentleman's Magazine attributed a rise of charitable giving in Britain to Dickens' novella. In 1874, Robert Louis Stevenson, after reading Dickens' Christmas books, vowed to give generously to those in need, and Thomas Carlyle expressed generous hospitality by hosting 2 Christmas dinners after reading the book. In 1867, one American businessman was so moved by attending a reading that he closed his factory on Christmas Day and sent every employee a turkey. In the early years of 20th century, Maud of Wales, the Queen of Norway, sent gifts to London's disabled children signed with Tiny Tim's love. Regarding the novella, the author J.K. Chesterton once wrote, "The beauty and blessing of the story lie in the great furnace of real happiness that glows through Scrooge and everything around him. Whether the Christmas visions would or would not convert Scrooge, they convert us." Dickens historian Paul Davis, analyzing the changes made to adaptations over time, sees changes to the focus of the story and its characters to reflect mainstream thinking of the period. While Dickens' Victorian audiences would have viewed the tale as a spiritual but secular parable, in the early 20th century it became a children's story, read by parents who remembered their parents reading it when they were younger. In the lead-up to and during the Great Depression, Davis identifies that while some see the story as a denunciation of capitalism, most read it as a way to escape oppressive economic realities. The film versions of the 1930s were different in the UK and the US. British-made films showed a traditional telling of the story. In contrast, US-made works showed Cratchit in a more central role, escaping the depression caused by European bankers and celebrating what Davis calls the Christmas of the common man. In the 1960s, Scrooge was sometimes portrayed as a Freudian figure wrestling with his past. By the 1880s, he was again set in a world of depression and economic uncertainty. Charles Dickens' immortal tale of Ebenezer Scrooge, A Christmas Carol, is one that will continue to impact all who read it. Even centuries later, the story will continue to inspire, delight, and, best of all, make people think. That is, after all, what classics do. And that just about wraps up this one. What did you think? I had an absolute blast talking to you today. I hope you'll join me for more fascinating discussion about books, books, and more books. I'm so glad you have become a member of Darla's Book Club. Feel free to hop on the couch and talk novels with me anytime. I'll see you soon.